You are used to thinking that the death of a queen is a grand event. Somber halls, mourning garments, sorrowful faces, and noble speeches. You are mistaken. In the Middle Ages, death is not a drama, but a drawn out routine, not a feat, but a daily decay under the supervision of inept doctors, superstitious monks, and indifferent courtiers. You will be treated with leeches, smoked with saints' bones, given sour wine to drink, and kept in the cold, not out of malice, but out of an age old foolishness that centuries later will be called medicine. People will fear you, but not pity you. Your body will become the battlefield for political intrigue, and your pain, a topic for dispassionate conversation. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I'm genuinely curious to see who has joined us. Now, settle in. We're about to begin. You are born into a world that is not yet waiting for you. It is a world that sighs under the heavy tapestries of the 13th century, and you, Jean, first of your name in Navarre, emerge in the year 1273 in a castle that is both magnificent and uncomfortably cold. The moment you take your first breath, you are more than just a girl. You are already a minor political event, a fragile hope wrapped in swaddling, and a future pawn on the chessboard of kingdoms. People walk a little softer around your cradle, whispering about your mother, who does not live long enough to warn you that all good things, especially mothers, are in short supply for royal daughters. Your early days are a parade of carved wood, stone walls, and drafty corridors. The windows are made of horn, not glass, which is both symbolic and terribly inefficient for keeping out the wind. Nurses bundle you in furs, but you still shiver. You are surrounded by the thick scent of incense, stale bread, and sometimes the alarming tang of feverish bodies. You learn quickly that even in luxury, you are never quite safe. Sickness stalks the corridors, and every cough or shiver is greeted with nervous superstition. The best medical advice you will receive as a child: do not sit on cold stone, do not breathe night air, and do not, under any circumstances, trust the moon. Your education is a careful mix of prayers, etiquette, and a deeply practical fear of the unknown. You are taught to kneel before God and before men, though never with too much enthusiasm in either case. Your tutors fill your head with stories of saints who die in agony and queens who die in childbirth. You learn to count your blessings and your heartbeats with equal skepticism. There are more rules than reasons, and every rule, as it turns out, is designed to keep you from dying too soon. Ironically, nothing you learn will ultimately save you. You spend hours in candlelit rooms memorizing prayers to obscure saints, just in case one of them is responsible for small fevers, sudden chills, or the headaches that always seem to follow the visits of the court physician. Your dolls are not really for playing, but for learning to pose quietly, as you will one day pose for official portraits, an exercise in stillness and patience, and a rehearsal for the even greater stillness that will one day be required. Outside, The peasants toil in the fields, and their lives are nasty, brutish, and short. Inside, you realize things are not so different. The difference is a matter of degree, not kind. Your every cold is met with an overabundance of prayers, relics, and advice, but almost no useful medicine. You are the living embodiment of nobility, which in your case means you will suffer and die in a slightly softer bed than most. Even in your early years, you see more death than laughter. The sick rooms are never truly silent. The castle's stone absorbs the wails and prayers and releases them late at night when you are trying to sleep. The nannies gossip about ghosts and curses. You learn, almost by instinct, to fear the unexplained, a fever that lingers, a rash that spreads, a chill that never goes away. Every winter you survive colds, fevers, and the sort of minor ailments that left unchecked can become major ones. The royal physicians dabble in the sciences of leeches and bloodletting, assuring you that bad humors are to blame for most of life's misfortunes. When you do recover, it is credited not to nature, but to the intervention of yet another fragment of a saint's shin bone, which is placed on your pillow with great ceremony and no discernible effect. Sometimes the laughter in the halls is nervous, brittle. Nobody trusts good fortune. You are constantly reminded, with cheerful fatalism, that God's will may not align with your own wishes or your continued breathing. By the age of 6, you have already begun to suspect that life is a temporary condition and that its management is mostly a matter of waiting for the next crisis. The court is full of whispering voices, nurses, tutors, priests, distant relatives, each convinced they know the secret to keeping you alive. You are told to wear a sprig of rosemary pinned to your chemise, to avoid the color black, to bathe only when the moon is waxing, and to fear, above all, the mysterious cold humors that supposedly breed in shadows. You pretend to obey, because obedience is easier than explaining how little you believe in any of it. This, then, is your childhood, a careful balancing act between privilege and paranoia. You are taught to smile and wave, to eat what you are given, though never quite enough to spoil your delicate digestion, and to sit quietly as the world decides your fate. You learn to listen at doors, to read faces, and to distrust the optimism of adults. By the time you are 10, you are already a small expert in disappointment and delay, and you know, with a clarity rare for your age, that every good thing is borrowed and every blessing is just another word for not dead yet. You will remember this feeling for the rest of your short life, and as the shadows lengthen and the fevers grow, you will wonder if things might have been different had you been born in another time, another place, or as someone else entirely. But this is not that kind of story. You are Jean. You are born to suffer, and if you are lucky, to die interestingly enough that someone might remember your name. You grow older, but not by much. Childhood in a medieval palace does not afford the luxury of innocence for long. You are declared Queen of Navarre before you even understand the concept of borders, sovereignty, or the subtle distinction between a blessing and a burden. Your father, King Henry I, dies when you are still too small to hold a sword, but old enough to hold a scepter, though it weighs about the same as your favorite doll and is only marginally less comforting. The adults around you seem anxious, as though your every sneeze is a potential disaster for a nation that has, unfortunately, placed its faith in the health of a child. At council meetings, old men argue about your guardianship, your engagement, your daily meals. You have no say, of course, but your opinion is often discussed in your absence, sometimes with a respectful nod towards your cradle, as if your stuffed animals might weigh in on matters of state. You learn quickly that your illnesses are not just a personal inconvenience, but a political event. Each time you cough, a new round of prayers is organized. When you develop a rash, undoubtedly from wearing the same linen undergarments day after day, for laundry is an ordeal fit only for servants, a wave of panic ripples through the castle. Is it measles? Is it pox? Is it witchcraft? Is it the first sign of divine displeasure? The answer, inevitably, is all of the above and also none. Your toys are not mere objects of play, but are instead grim reminders of the dynasty you are supposed to preserve. You own miniature thrones, tiny crowns, and a remarkable collection of dolls dressed as abbots, bishops, and knights, though none of them ever seem as healthy as the illustrations in your illuminated manuscripts. Sometimes you imagine their painted faces grimacing in sympathy as you shiver with your latest fever. Even in play, you practice suffering. The castle's kitchens produce food more appropriate for a festival than for the frail stomach of a child. Roasted meats, heavy pies, and bread so hard you could use it for defense. Your body, delicate by design, rebels. Each stomach ache is dissected by your caretakers with the gravity of a royal edict. The leeches are summoned, blood is drawn, and every medicinal herb known to the kingdom is forced down your throat in bitter concoctions that are supposed to drive out evil vapors, but mostly drive out your will to live. Winter is the most dangerous season. The stone walls, already inhospitable in spring, become outright malevolent when the temperature drops. Cold drafts wind through the corridors, and your caretakers wrap you in so many layers of clothing that movement becomes an academic question. You spend long days sitting beside a fireplace that produces more smoke than heat, your skin raw from the constant rubbing of rough wool. Every cough, every sniffle is met with the grim resignation of people who know that death prefers the company of children. It does not help that hygiene is, in your era, more a theory than a practice. Baths are rare, reserved for special occasions or medical crises, and the water is often colder than the air. You are told that too much bathing is dangerous and might unbalance your humors. Instead, you are dusted with powders and perfumes, which do little to disguise the underlying aroma of dread. At night, you are put to bed in a chamber designed less for comfort than for display. Heavy curtains block out what little light the moon might offer. If you are unlucky, the court physician appears, smelling of vinegar and pessimism, to feel your forehead and mutter about the alignment of the planets. You are given a fragment of bone allegedly from a saint, but more likely from a goat, to hold as you sleep. You clutch it tightly, not because you believe in miracles, but because everyone else seems to want you to. As the years crawl by, you become something of a connoisseur of ailments. You know the difference between a fleeting chill and a lingering fever, between the ache of growing bones and the sharper pain that signals something more sinister. You learn to distinguish between the pious concern of your caretakers and their growing impatience. Your role as the future of the kingdom is less about living and more about not dying spectacularly, at least not before a suitable marriage can be arranged. Rumors begin to circulate in the court, always just out of earshot, always about you. She is too thin. She coughs too much. She is cursed, perhaps. The whispers are carried by drafts as efficiently as any letter. You learn to read the expressions of those around you, to notice when a nurse crosses herself a second time after tucking you in, or when the steward leaves a bowl of garlic under your bed. Fear is a form of communication, and you become fluent in its dialects. Your education continues, as much about endurance as about enlightenment. You learn Latin prayers, French etiquette, and the subtle art of pretending you do not notice when people flinch at your latest sneeze. Your dolls, once silent confidants, are now tiny witnesses to your decline. You wonder, with a child's sincerity, if it is possible to die of boredom alone. In those moments between one illness and the next, you feel almost normal. You chase the light in the corridors. You laugh at court jesters whose jokes you only half understand, and you sometimes even imagine a future that does not end with a sudden chill or an unexplained pain. But those moments are fleeting, and the shadow of your first real diagnosis, whatever it may be, looms larger each year. The truth, which you come to understand with a clarity far beyond your years, is that in your world, every minor illness is a rehearsal for something far more permanent. Your health, such as it is a matter not just of fate, but of inheritance, of politics, of the peculiar superstitions that govern both medicine and monarchy. You are learning, slowly but inevitably, that not all diseases are curable, and that sometimes survival itself is simply a matter of postponement. This is how your diagnosis begins, not with a sudden catastrophe, but with the slow, relentless accumulation of minor setbacks. Each fever leaves you a little weaker. Each remedy leaves you a little more cynical. The kingdom waits for you to grow strong, but you already know, though you do not yet have the words, that strength in your case is not so much a gift as a challenge, and that every year you survive is a kind of victory, if only because you have managed for now to stay one step ahead of the inevitable. You do not choose your marriage any more than you choose your ailments. By the time you are old enough to understand what a wedding actually means, your fate is already sealed in wax and parchment. The ink on your betrothal contract dries before your hands are steady enough to write your own name. You are officially to become the wife of Philippe, the French prince, destined to be the next king of France, with the future of two kingdoms teetering unsteadily on your narrow, shivering shoulders. The royal wedding is an event for the ages, or so the poets will claim, their verses all gold and glory, and none of the subtle mold that clings to the tapestries. The reality is less poetic. You are draped in brocade heavy enough to bruise your collarbones, crowned with a circlet that pinches your temples, and watched by a crowd so vast that it might as well be a swarm. You smile as you have been taught, though your lips tremble with something that could easily be mistaken for joy if you did not know better. Your husband is neither ogre nor prince charming, but rather a necessary variable in the great equation of royal survival. He is polite, occasionally attentive, but also preoccupied with hunting, with court business, with the infinitely complex politics of his father's kingdom. You are, to him, an essential treaty in the shape of a woman. On your wedding night, the courtiers wait outside your door, whispering, taking notes for future gossip and genealogies. You do not get much sleep, nor does anyone else. With marriage comes a change of scenery, but not of circumstance. You are whisked away from Navarre, deposited in the even grander, colder halls of the French royal court. Here, everything is unfamiliar: the accent, the diet, the schedule, even the piety. Your new chambers are resplendent with silk and marble, but there are draughts in every corner, and the unfamiliar faces in every corridor inspire more suspicion than comfort. The food is different, richer, heavier, laced with exotic spices. Unfortunately, your stomach, always the most sensitive part of your anatomy, rebels against these new flavors. Each meal is an ordeal, and each time you politely refuse a second helping, the kitchen staff whisper, "She is too thin. She eats like a bird." Perhaps the queen is unwell. You learn to smile through nausea, to pretend that a persistent cough is just the result of dust in the tapestries or a cold night breeze. There are more servants now, but also more responsibilities. You are a queen, but also a wife, and the expectations for both roles are endless. The court is a maze of obligation. You must host banquets, attend masses, smile graciously at ambassadors, and produce heirs, preferably male, preferably in good health, preferably without delay. Each task is more draining than the last, and no one seems to notice when you retreat to your chambers early, citing female complaints that nobody dares question too closely. Your body, already fragile, struggles to adapt. The new climate is damper, the winters harsher, and the water, you are sternly informed, is best left to the peasants. Wine is safer, they say, though you find it cloying and headache inducing. The physicians, imported at great expense from Paris and Montpellier, examine you with the same distant curiosity they might apply to an ailing racehorse. Their diagnoses range from the comically vague and imbalance of humors to the ominously specific, a wasting weakness of the chest. For every symptom, there is a remedy: bloodletting, purgatives, tinctures of bitter herbs, and a strictly enforced diet of hope and patience. You are watched constantly, intensely. Every moment of fatigue, Every involuntary shudder becomes court news. The queen, it is rumored, spends too much time in prayer, which is, of course, a sign of either secret piety or secret illness. You are advised to walk in the gardens more often, but not when it rains, and never after sunset, lest you catch a chill. You develop a cough in spring, and by autumn it has become part of your legend. The marriage bed is its own peculiar battlefield. You have been told, delicately and with much blushing, what is expected of a queen and wife. The reality is less exciting than you feared and more uncomfortable than you hoped. You do your duty, eyes squeezed shut, counting the beams on the ceiling and the hours until you can once again feign sleep. Each month brings the possibility of pregnancy, which is both a promise and a threat. Your job is to produce heirs, but your body is a reluctant participant in this arrangement. After each encounter, you feel a heaviness in your chest, a discomfort that is equal parts physical pain and existential dread. You begin to notice that the other women at court, particularly the older ones, regard you with a mixture of pity and envy. Pity because your frailty is no secret. Envy because even frail queens command more attention than robust ladies in waiting. You see yourself reflected in their glances, a fragile vessel, cracked and patched, still expected to carry the future. Occasionally, Felipe visits your chambers late at night, bringing the chill of the corridors with him. He talks of politics, of hunting, of matters you do not care about, and he asks, without really asking, about your health. You assure him that you are well, that the coughing is nothing, that the fatigue will pass. He nods, satisfied, and you both return to the pretense of marital harmony. There are moments of tenderness, brief, awkward, often interrupted by a coughing fit or a message from the king. You wonder, sometimes, what it would be like to be loved simply, with no treaties attached, no succession plans at stake. But this is not your story, and you remind yourself that marriage, for people like you, is merely a form of politics with a different wardrobe. As the months pass, you find yourself growing not stronger, but more resigned. The routines of marriage and monarchy blend together into a gray fog, punctuated by bouts of illness, endless ceremonies, and the occasional panic when you collapse in the middle of mass or a banquet. The court physicians become frequent visitors, their faces as familiar as your own, their remedies increasingly desperate. You begin to suspect that marriage has not saved you from anything, least of all yourself. In fact, it has simply added another layer of expectation to the suffocating weight of survival. You are not just a queen, not just a wife. You are a collection of symptoms, a walking diagnosis, a rumor in the making. The realization settles over you like a damp blanket. Your story, from the very beginning, has never really been your own. You belong to your father, to your husband, to the court, to the kingdom. You belong to the disease that creeps slowly through your bones, biding its time, patient as history itself. Pregnancy arrives not as a blessing, but as yet another duty. You do not recall precisely when you first suspect it. Perhaps after another of those endless dinners where you find the mere smell of roasted venison unbearable, or perhaps during a morning when the familiar nausea refuses to subside, clinging to you more tightly than your embroidered nightgown. In any case, your ladies in waiting notice before you do, and the news is relayed through whispered corridors until it reaches your husband, who receives it with a mixture of relief and apprehension, as if unsure whether this is the promise of an heir or the prelude to disaster. The royal physicians descend on your chambers with the solemnity of priests and the optimism of gravediggers. They bring with them a collection of medieval wisdom, decoctions of fennel, strict bed rest, long prayers to various saints of fertility. You are instructed to avoid certain foods. Onions, apparently, are a risk to the unborn, and to eat others, stale bread dipped in watered wine, hardly an improvement. The most important advice is, as always, to avoid cold drafts, sharp emotions, and, most dangerous of all, your own anxieties. Each day is a new adventure in discomfort. The swelling of your belly is greeted as a sign of national hope, but for you it is simply an additional weight, a new set of aches layered atop the old ones. Your joints throb, your skin itches, and you grow increasingly pale, a fact which the court interprets either as proof of your delicate nobility or evidence that you are fading by inches. Your only consolation is that you are not alone in your misery. Your servants, your ladies, the entire court pivots around your moods and your symptoms, each one invested in your body as if it were a field to be tilled and harvested for dynastic gain. The first birth is a spectacle, and you, naturally, are the stage. The midwives argue over tradition, whether to invoke the Virgin or the more practical saint, Margaret, whether to keep the fire roaring or let the air cool, whether to allow your husband in the room or exile him with the other anxious men. You have no say, which is, you suppose, a comfort. The pain is enough to occupy every corner of your attention. When the child arrives, screaming, slippery, entirely unimpressed by your rank, the relief is not only yours. There are cheers, tears, and proclamations, and you are quickly forgotten in the joyful chaos, left to bleed and shiver under the gaze of your exhausted attendants. The aftermath is no fairy tale. You do not spring from bed, glowing with maternal fulfillment. Instead, you are feverish, wrung out, beset by aches that do not seem to belong to any single part of your body, but to all of you at once. You are told that weakness after childbirth is to be expected, but your weakness lingers beyond the polite window of recovery. Your appetite is gone, your limbs are heavy, your dreams are fitful, haunted by the cries of infants and the hollow eyes of saints on faded tapestries. Still, you survive, and in time, you are pregnant again. The pattern repeats, each cycle more grueling than the last. The kingdom expects heirs, and you, despite your failing health, continue to deliver them, as if your body were a vessel made solely for this purpose. With each birth, your vitality dwindles. You develop a cough that never entirely disappears, a pain in your side that sometimes makes it difficult to breathe. Your hair thins, your skin becomes translucent, and your eyes grow shadowed. The royal court, ever alert for signs of scandal or disaster, begins to murmur, "She is not what she was. She is fading." The remedies offered are familiar, if not comforting. Bloodletting is proposed, always with the caveat that it must not be overdone, lest you weaken the spirits. You are encouraged to drink more wine, good for the blood, they say, and to avoid water entirely, too dangerous. Herbal infusions are pressed upon you, their taste as bitter as the hope they carry. Sometimes a physician suggests leeches or a poultice of questionable provenance. You submit, not out of faith, but out of habit. To resist is pointless. To hope is exhausting. Your children, meanwhile, are raised more by the court than by you. You see them for ceremonial purposes, baptisms, portraits, carefully staged moments of maternal affection. In truth, you are too tired to care much. Your body, which once belonged to you, now belongs to history, to France, to Navarre, to the doctors, to the relentless machinery of royal expectation. There are moments, usually in the dead of night, when the pain is sharpest and the castle quietest, when you wonder if this is the price all women must pay, or if yours is a special, particularly ironic suffering reserved for queens who are too valuable to die quickly and too frail to live easily. You think of your mother, lost to you in infancy, and wonder if she felt the same dull, resigned anger that sometimes fills you. You wonder if your daughters, if they survive, will feel it too. Court life continues around you, indifferent to your struggle. There are feasts, hunts, disputes, entertainments, all proceeding as if the queen were not laboring beneath an invisible weight. You watch from your window as the seasons change, as faces come and go, as the world persists in its indifferent routine. You feel less like a participant than a witness, an emblem rather than a woman. As each pregnancy drains you further, you begin to suspect that your body is quietly plotting against you. The healers are baffled, the priests are sympathetic, the court is impatient. There is talk of miraculous relics, of pilgrimages to distant shrines, of prayers and fasting, and the application of yet more saints' bones. You are too tired to protest. When a priest ties a holy medal around your neck, or a physician forces you to swallow another concoction, promising renewed vigor. You are not stupid, despite what your tutors may have supposed. You sense what no one dares say, that this is not simply exhaustion or melancholy, but something deeper, more implacable. An illness is rooting itself inside you, growing stronger as you grow weaker. Each child you bear is both an heir and a thief, taking with them another piece of the woman you once were. You carry not only the future of a dynasty, but the slow, relentless approach of your own end. Each contraction is a reminder, each night of feverish shivering, another milestone on a journey you cannot escape. Still, you endure, because endurance is all that is expected of you and all that is left. You learn quickly that life in a palace is as much about suspicion as ceremony. Your daily existence is surrounded by whispers, barely audible at first, then unmistakable. Court life, you realize, is an elaborate tapestry of secrets and schemes, with everyone watching, everyone weighing their own fortunes against yours. The air is thick with anxiety, perfumed only faintly by roses and incense. Mostly, it smells of anticipation and fear. Some evenings, when you manage to force down a mouthful of food, you find yourself wondering, did the cook add a pinch of basil or a dash of belladonna? The court is full of stories about poisoning, some distant, some recent, all chilling. You have heard them since childhood. Rival queens who sipped wine and never rose again, powerful lords felled by tainted fruit, invisible enemies striking in the dead of night. Once you wake up in the dark, your lips tingling from the remnants of yesterday's spiced wine, and for a moment you are certain you are about to die. Instead, you simply shiver, clutching the covers, angry at yourself for the childish fear. Food, which should be a comfort, becomes a calculated risk. Every dish is first tasted by a servant, but you notice that those servants tend not to last long. One, a quiet girl with sad eyes, disappears without explanation after she faints at your table. Another is found in the stables, retching. The rumors blossom. The queen is cursed, some say. Others whisper, someone wants her gone. You begin to see enemies in every shadow, in every too sweet tart or slightly cloudy goblet of wine. Your own symptoms do little to ease your mind. Illness comes and goes, fevers that linger, rashes that fade and return, a headache that seems to settle behind your eyes and take up residence there. The court physicians debate endlessly. Is it a natural illness, the consequence of a weakened constitution and unfortunate stars? Or is it something more deliberate, a slow, patient murder unfolding one unremarkable day at a time? You do not know, and neither do they, but everyone agrees that it would not be the first time. You hear the word poison often enough that it loses its power to terrify. Instead, you become numb to it, accepting the possibility as one accepts the changing seasons or the likelihood of rain. You inspect every cup, eye every bowl, and watch your ladies in waiting with the careful skepticism of a professional gambler. You refuse to eat pomegranates, too red, too symbolic, and you ask for your food to be brought only from the kitchen, never from the hands of another noblewoman. The priests are called to bless your chamber, to sprinkle holy water on the threshold, and mumble prayers over your bed. Your husband scoffs. Such superstition, he says, is for peasants, but you insist. If faith is armor, you will take any scrap you can find. You sleep with a silver cross under your pillow and a sprig of rue pinned to your nightgown, half believing in their power, half knowing it is all for show. Not all dangers are invisible. The court is a nest of rivalries, each as venomous as any spider lurking in your sheets. The ladies who curtsy before you may be plotting with your enemies behind your back. Your husband's advisors see your frailty as an opportunity, not a tragedy. There is always someone waiting in the wings, ready to step forward when you finally falter. Even the midwives and physicians, sworn to care for you, might be swayed by a bribe or a promise. Loyalty in the palace, like health, is a fleeting thing. You try to confide in your husband, but he is distracted, always elsewhere, at council, at the hunt, at war with problems only kings can understand. When you tell him about your fears, he laughs, then sighs, then changes the subject. He assures you that you are safe, that nobody would dare harm a queen, but his words ring hollow. You remember your childhood, the lessons about the fate of unlucky royals, and you find no comfort there. As time passes, your fears harden into routine. You refuse certain foods, avoid particular faces, order new locks for your chambers. You pray, not so much for health as for an easy end, one that comes quickly and quietly, without the slow agony of suspicion and regret. You become skilled at hiding your symptoms, pretending to be well when you are not, lest your enemies mistake your suffering for weakness and strike. And yet, as the days blur into weeks and months, you begin to wonder if you have simply become another character in the palace's endless drama, a queen perpetually on the edge of disaster, a living symbol of frailty and misfortune. The intrigue does not end. It simply changes form, adapting to the rhythms of your decline. Even the physicians seem to give up hope, offering only the most generic advice. Rest more, worry less, trust in God. It is perhaps the greatest irony of your life that you can never be certain whether your decline is natural or orchestrated. You exist in a perpetual twilight, halfway between martyr and victim, trapped in a story where every chapter ends with the same question: was it illness or was it poison? The answer, of course, is irrelevant. The outcome is always the same. In the end, it does not matter what truly kills you: an enemy's hand or the slow rot of your own failing body. The effect is the same. Each day, you grow a little weaker, a little less yourself. The palace intrigue, the threats of poison, and the relentless parade of natural illnesses become the backdrop to your existence, a low, ceaseless hum that drowns out hope and certainty alike. You learn, as all queens must, that in the end, suffering is the only certainty. Every courtier, every advisor, every rival, they all await your final, conclusive symptom, and you, quietly, await it too. Your days are now measured in consultations. The court physicians come and go with the solemnity of monks and the optimism of gamblers. They bring with them not just their knowledge, which is dubious, but also a collection of books, tools, powders, amulets, and the weight of their own reputations. Diagnosis in your time is a strange hybrid, a negotiation between superstition and the fledgling science of the medieval age. You are not a patient, you are a battlefield for theories. It begins each morning with your pulse. The chief physician, who, by reputation, once studied in Paris, for several years and is thus considered almost a sorcerer, holds your wrist in one hand and a scented pomander in the other. He closes his eyes. He mutters. Sometimes you think he is simply counting the seconds until his next meal. He declares your pulse too fast, too slow, too thready, or disturbed by female vapors. He prescribes rest. He prescribes movement. He prescribes hope. Each day brings a new theory for your decline. One day, it is black bile thought to be the cause of all melancholy and persistent coughs. Another day, it is an excess of cold humors which supposedly gather in your womb and send chills up your spine. Another physician suspects contagion of the blood, a popular explanation, as it is safely vague and yet terribly alarming. You overhear the phrase consumption, and for a while, every woman at court seems to flinch whenever you cough. Bloodletting is the universal prescription. There are endless debates about how much blood is too much, which veins should be opened, and whether you should be bled while sitting, standing, or lying down. You have, by now, an intimate acquaintance with the taste of iron in your mouth and the sensation of lightheadedness that follows these procedures. The hope is that your body will rebalance itself once the bad blood is removed, as if your illness is merely a plumbing issue, and the solution is simply to drain you until you are well, or failing that, until you are someone else's problem. You are offered herbal remedies by the basketful: dried sage for strength, chamomile for calm, pennyroyal for your nerves. A particularly earnest apothecary proposes a paste made from ground beetles mixed with honey and the ashes of last year's Easter candles. You drink these concoctions because refusing is impolite, and because hope, no matter how ridiculous, requires less energy than defiance. Sometimes the remedies work in the sense that you fall into a heavy, drugged sleep and miss the endless arguments outside your chamber door. Superstition has its own logic, and it is never far from medicine. Relics are paraded through your bedchamber: a sliver of bone, a lock of hair, a fragment of cloth, each said to belong to a different saint. Some are supposed to ward off fever, others to grant easy breathing, others to protect against the evil eye, which your grandmother's nurse still insists is responsible for most female complaints. You are encouraged to hold these relics, to recite prayers, to sleep with them under your pillow. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you pretend. The relics do not complain. If all else fails, there are rituals. A priest is summoned to perform a blessing, splashing holy water on your sheets and muttering in Latin. Your chamber is smoked with herbs, sage, rosemary, sometimes wormwood, leaving the air thick, acrid, and almost unbreathable. The servants hang garlands of garlic and rue from your bedposts. You suspect that the only spirits banished by these rituals are those of fresh air and comfort. You become an object of professional fascination. The physicians argue not just about your health, but about medical philosophy itself. Is disease a punishment from God? Is it caused by the imbalance of bodily humors? Or is it the result of invisible creatures, miasmas, spirits, tiny demons that crawl unseen. Each theory comes with its own treatment and its own set of anxieties. You nod dutifully as they explain their reasoning, and you memorize the rhythms of their speeches so you can pretend to listen when you are too tired to care. Diagnosis is, in practice, more art than science, an art based on observation, imagination, and the desperate need to be right. The physicians are careful to never contradict each other directly. Instead, they phrase their disagreements in riddles and Latin, ensuring that no matter what happens, nobody will be blamed. When one treatment fails, another is tried, then another, until your life is nothing but a long parade of failed experiments. Sometimes the diagnoses are a comfort. It is easier to believe in black bile or bad air than to confront the randomness of suffering. Other times, you sense that the physicians are as frightened as you, dressing up their ignorance in the language of scholarship. They are quick to assure you that your illness is not your fault, but they are equally quick to remind you that recovery, should it come, will be a miracle, and thus not really their responsibility. In rare moments of honesty, late at night, or when the pain is too sharp for pretense, you wonder if all the learned men in Europe could ever truly know what ails you. Perhaps illness, like royalty, is simply a matter of chance, bestowed without reason, taken without warning, and interpreted however suits the needs of those in power. Still, you endure the endless cycle of diagnosis and disappointment. You are poked, prodded, bled, blessed, and buried beneath a mountain of advice. Your only certainty is that nobody knows what is wrong, and nobody ever will. In this way, you become both a lesson and a warning, a living symbol of the limits of medieval medicine, and a reminder that sometimes the only thing more frightening than illness is the attempt to cure it. When all else fails, and it nearly always does, you are encouraged to pursue miracles. Medieval faith is a full-time occupation, and you are at the center of its busiest department, the relentless quest for divine intervention. If a new relic is discovered, no matter how questionable its provenance, it will soon be laid reverently at the foot of your bed as if the jawbone of an obscure martyr from the south of Italy is just the thing to mend a queen's lungs or still her nightly chills. You soon find yourself surrounded by a peculiar menagerie. There is a thorn that is said to have crowned Christ, a vial of tears from a saint who cried for 3 days, the liquid suspiciously clear and sweet smelling, and the delicately wrapped finger of Saint Margaret, so shriveled and dark that it looks more like a bit of root than anything once human. These relics are treated with the utmost seriousness. They are paraded through your chamber by priests and nuns who mutter urgent prayers, their eyes darting anxiously between you and the nearest exit, as if unsure which of you is likelier to break first. Each time you fall ill, a new round of sacred objects is deployed. The air grows thick with the mixed scents of beeswax, frankincense, and fear. At the first sign of fever, a nun appears with a silver locket containing a drop of the Virgin's milk. It is pressed against your forehead, your wrist, your chest. She recites a prayer that sounds suspiciously like the one from the last relic, but perhaps in a different order, as if the saints themselves might be fooled by variety. For a few hours, there is always hope, a brief suspension of the ordinary. Your attendants whisper that you look stronger, that your color is improved, that perhaps the relic is working. You are tempted for a moment to believe them, but then the pain returns, or the cough resumes, and the hopeful relic is returned to its box, replaced by the next in a seemingly endless procession. The priests are not content with relics alone. They bring with them a portable altar, and the Mass is celebrated at your bedside with as much ceremony as your weakness will allow. The muttered Latin, the jingle of bells, the solemn procession of sacraments. It is meant to bring comfort, but more often it feels like a rehearsal for your funeral. You are sprinkled with holy water, anointed with oil, and urged to confess your sins just in case. You comply because defiance is as exhausting as illness. You wonder if the priests believe in any of it themselves. Their faces are carefully composed, but their eyes are always calculating, always glancing sideways to see how your audience is receiving the spectacle. The relics are as much about managing the court's anxiety as about healing you. Your suffering is both personal tragedy and public theater, a chance for everyone to remind themselves that in the end, only God decides who lives and who dies. Helplessness becomes a way of life. You feel it most acutely in the moments when the relics have failed, the prayers have been exhausted, and the world returns to its ordinary cold indifference. There is a kind of bleak comfort in this routine, a reminder that your fate is out of everyone's hands, including your own. The physicians, the priests, your husband, your servants, they all want to help, but none of them can. You are the living demonstration of the limits of faith, just as you are of the limits of medicine. Sometimes the court gossips about miracles happening elsewhere. Did you hear? Someone whispers. A woman in Provence was cured by a piece of St. Blaise's rib. Another claims to know a man whose daughter was healed by touching the cloak of a traveling friar. The stories circulate, growing more extravagant with each telling, but none of the miracles ever seem to visit your chambers. You begin to wonder if you are being punished, or if, perhaps, the supply of genuine relics has long since run out. Your relationship with the relics becomes oddly intimate. You find yourself talking to them in the dead of night, confessing your fears to a wooden cross or a lump of old bone. You bargain, you plead, you promise to be better, to be braver, to be worthy of a miracle. But the relics, like the saints themselves, are silent. You realize, after a time, that you are praying less for healing than for comfort, some sign, however faint, that your suffering has meaning. There are occasionally brief moments of improvement. Your fever breaks, or your cough subsides, and the entire court rejoices. The relic of the week is celebrated as the latest miracle worker, and you are paraded, still pale and weak, as proof of God's mercy. But the reprieves are always temporary. The symptoms return, The relic is quietly retired, and the search for the next miracle begins anew. You come to understand that the relics are not about you, not really. They are about the hope of everyone else, the hope that suffering has a cause, that pain can be banished, that the world is not as random and cruel as it so often seems. You become a vessel for this hope, just as you are for the saints' bones and the prayers that never quite reach heaven. In the end, the only consistent miracle is that you remain alive day after day despite everything. It is a small, lonely victory, but it is yours. You learn to accept the helplessness, to find a kind of solace in the rituals and routines, to let the faith of others wash over you like the incense that fills your room. If a miracle is coming, it will have to hurry. If illness is a constant companion, then treatment is a visiting relative who overstays their welcome, loud, insistent, and usually making everything worse. It is one of the great ironies of your life that you sometimes dread the healers more than the sickness. In your world, medical attention is not a gentle art, but an act of aggression, a test of endurance dressed up as hope. The only thing more dangerous than disease is a doctor who refuses to give up. You are, at all hours, at the mercy of the medical arts. The term art is generous. What actually arrives at your bedside is a parade of ancient rituals, folk wisdom, and innovations that should have remained private experiments. The first and last resort is always bloodletting. You have grown so familiar with the sight of your own blood trickling into a bowl that you could swear the color is changing over time, sometimes bright and alarming, sometimes as dull as old rubies. The logic is unimpeachable, at least in theory. Remove the bad blood, remove the illness. But your experience tells a different story. Each time they open a vein in your arm or your ankle, you are left weaker, colder, and more certain that if the disease does not finish you, the cure will. Sometimes they use leeches, black and shiny, eager to do their work. The first time, you scream. After that, you simply close your eyes and pretend to be elsewhere. And then come the purgatives. There are powders, tinctures, and mysterious mixtures, all promising to cleanse you of poisons. You are forced to swallow things you would not wish on your worst enemy. Concoctions made from rotten apples, the dried gall of a pig, and, once, something so bitter that it makes you retch for hours. The court physician is delighted. It means it is working, he explains, as if a purging queen is the true sign of divine favor. You are regularly wrapped in poultices, hot, sticky, and smelling of overripe onions or sour milk. Sometimes the poultices are made of bread and lard, other times exotic herbs purchased at enormous cost from Venetian merchants. None of them seem to do much, except leave rashes where the skin was healthy and uncomfortably sticky patches everywhere else. The servants change your sheets daily, but you can smell yourself even after they finish, a sour aroma that lingers like a warning. Bathing, which might be a comfort in another age, is prescribed only under special circumstances. The water must be precisely the right temperature, and a priest must bless it, preferably with a relic bobbing in the basin. You are scrubbed with rough cloths, which leaves your skin red and raw. Too many baths, they say, will loosen your humors. Too few, and you will be the talk of the court for the wrong reasons. You settle for just enough bathing to remain presentable, but not enough to feel clean. Sometimes, more innovative treatments appear, brought by traveling healers eager to make a name for themselves at your expense. You are presented with powders from the East, which turn your tongue numb and do little else. A Greek physician brings a jar of fermented honey and claims it will revive your spirits. It only succeeds in giving you a headache. One particularly ambitious barber surgeon suggests removing a troublesome tooth, for the pain in your side is surely connected to your mouth. You decline politely. On days when you are at your weakest, you are encouraged to lie quietly while healers chant over your body. They wave smoke and feathers, recite invocations, and claim to see the evil spirits leaving your chest in wisps of fog. Sometimes, the only thing that leaves is your patience. You begin to wonder if the true miracle is that anyone survives their treatments long enough to be cured by accident. Your chamber becomes a medical theater, a constant parade of new faces and new ideas. Each healer is confident, each approach different, each failure quickly forgotten. The physicians argue among themselves in Latin, their words as sharp as their scalpels, but none will admit defeat. You are a puzzle to be solved, a case study for the next generation, an object lesson in the perils of royal blood. You notice that when your symptoms worsen after a new treatment, everyone becomes quieter. The healers avoid your gaze, your husband sighs, and your ladies in waiting busy themselves with embroidery. Failure, it seems, is something to be politely ignored. If you improve, however briefly, everyone claims credit. If you decline, well, perhaps your humors were too imbalanced to begin with. Occasionally, you are left alone for a few hours, the silence in your chamber more healing than any medicine. You begin to dread the sound of footsteps in the hall, the approach of another eager physician with a new theory and a fresh set of tools. Even prayers start to seem like a kind of treatment, endured, not enjoyed. The pain of your illness is real, but the pain of treatment is its own special variety, sharp, humiliating, and without the comfort of hope. You lose count of the scars left by lancets, the bruises from tight bandages, the burns from poultices heated too quickly. Your body becomes a canvas for failure, a record of good intentions gone wrong. Over time, you develop the stoicism of someone with no other choice. You submit to the treatments because refusing is unthinkable, but in your heart, you come to fear them more than the disease. You dream of gentle hands and soft voices, but wake to the clatter of bowls and the brisk orders of those determined to save you. If you could speak honestly, you would say, the treatment is worse than the disease. But honesty, like health, is a luxury for someone else. You lie still, you endure, you let them try and try again. It is a curious thing How suffering can isolate you. When your illness first appeared, the court surrounded you with anxious faces, a small army of concerned relatives, attendants, and healers. Their attention was overwhelming, almost suffocating. You were rarely alone. Someone was always at your side, offering a handkerchief, a prayer, a useless suggestion. But as the months stretch into years and your symptoms become a permanent fixture of palace life, you begin to notice a slow, silent exodus. It starts with the servants. The girl who used to fluff your pillows now lingers at the doorway, her eyes downcast, crossing herself before entering as if stepping into a chapel of suffering. The boy who once brought you fresh water twice a day now leaves the jug outside your door, knocks timidly, and flees before you can thank him. When you cough, you see faces flinch, bodies recoil. Some touch their amulets, others mumble prayers. You do not blame them. The fear is not personal, it is practical, almost instinctive. In a world where disease is a mystery, anyone who might be contagious is to be avoided. The doctors whisper about miasmas and bad air, but their theories do nothing to ease the atmosphere of suspicion. Rumors ripple through the palace. Some say your malady is punishment for an ancestral sin. Others claim it is the result of witchcraft. You become the subject of grim fascination. Some believe even looking at you too long might bring about weakness or a run of bad luck. At meals, you are placed at the far end of the table. Your dishes are prepared separately. Your cup is marked so no one else will touch it. You see to it that these precautions are observed, partly out of courtesy, partly because you have grown tired of watching food tasters pale with anxiety. Occasionally, your husband sits beside you, but more often he finds reasons to dine elsewhere. An urgent counsel, a distant hunt, a sudden preference for solitude. When he does join you, he keeps a polite distance, his words careful, his glances fleeting. You do not resent him for it. After all, kings are not immune to fear. Your ladies in waiting perform their duties with increasing reluctance. They still help you dress, brush your hair, and read you letters, but there is a new stiffness to their touch, a reluctance in their voices. If you drop something, it is not immediately retrieved. If you ask for help, it is given, but only after a small, nervous pause. You wonder if you are imagining it, but you know you are not. The isolation is not only physical. Conversation dwindles. Where once your chambers buzzed with gossip and laughter, now there is only the rustle of fabric, the soft tread of slippers, the faint clink of bottles. The topics, too, have changed. No one wants to speak of illness or of death or of anything unpleasant. Instead, there is talk of the weather, the latest pageant, the newest prayer for good health. All of it floats around you like mist, never quite settling, never quite reaching your heart. The fear of contagion becomes an unspoken law. You are not forbidden from appearing at court, but you are gently discouraged. Invitations arrive less frequently. When they do, you are advised to rest for the sake of your health. You oblige not because you agree, but because the prospect of entering a crowded hall only to see people shrink from your presence is more exhausting than solitude. The priests are frequent visitors at first. They come to administer sacraments, to offer comfort, to reassure you of your place in heaven's order. But even their visits become briefer, more formal, as if they too fear bringing something back to their flocks. The bishop sends his blessing in writing. The friars pray for you at a distance. In the rare moments when you venture out, perhaps to walk in the gardens or sit by an open window, you notice the way people give you space. Children are herded away by anxious mothers. Dogs bark and refuse to come near. The very air seems to thin out around you, as if your illness has become a cloud, drifting ahead of you, warning all who approach. With each passing day, you find yourself more alone. Your illness is no longer a shared burden, but a private curse. Sympathy, once freely given, is now replaced by the cold calculus of survival. You become invisible, a ghost moving through your own palace, haunting rooms that once echoed with your laughter. The walls close in, not because the palace has shrunk, but because everyone else has moved farther away. There is a final, bitter irony to your isolation. You begin to miss the very attentions that once annoyed you. The endless stream of questions, the fussing over your meals, the constant presence of well meaning relatives, these were all, in their way, proofs of life. Now, silence settles over everything, broken only by the sound of your own breathing and the occasional unwelcome cough. You realize, with a clarity only suffering can bring, that the greatest cruelty of illness is not the pain or even the fear, but the way it strips you of companionship. In your most vulnerable moments, you are left utterly alone, not out of malice, but out of self preservation, the oldest and most human instinct. You understand now why ghosts are said to be restless. They wander not out of hatred, but out of longing for the warmth they once knew. And so you endure alone among many, watching as the world quietly, inevitably turns away. There is a peculiar way in which time stretches and bends when you are ill, and you find yourself lost in its folds. In your youth, each day had a distinct flavor, a different lesson, a new visitor, the excitement or dread of some event, no matter how minor. But now, each day has the same taste, stale, metallic, and tinged with waiting. You wake up not so much to the world as to the knowledge that another day must be endured. The palace, so grand and intricate in better times, now seems designed for the passage of endless, empty hours. The high vaulted ceilings echo every cough and sigh. The long stone corridors magnify each footstep, then swallow it in silence. You sit by the window, wrapped in layers, watching clouds crawl across the sky with all the urgency of a funeral procession. Sometimes you count the panes of glass in the window, though you already know the number. Other times you listen to the clocks, marking the passing of hours that refuse to pass. The rhythm of your days is dictated by necessity, not desire. You wake late, not out of laziness, but because sleep is your only refuge from the monotony. Meals come and go, breakfast, when you are able to eat it, is the same thin broth. Lunch is a dry crust or a cup of watered wine. Dinner is a ritual of disappointment. Between meals, you sit in a chair by the fire or lie on your bed, reading the same passages of scripture or poetry over and over until the words lose their meaning. Sometimes, a lady in waiting reads aloud, her voice soft and careful, never rising above a whisper. She chooses cheerful stories, but they fail to lift the heavy veil that hangs over your chambers. The laughter, when it comes, is forced and always followed by a cough or a long silence. If you ask about court news, you get only the blandest answers. A new shipment of spices has arrived. A nobleman has lost a dog. The king is hunting in the north. Real news is kept from you, as if protecting you from the world could somehow restore your health. The seasons change outside your window, but the routine inside remains fixed. In spring, the rain beats against the panes, blurring the view of the gardens. In summer, the sun is a memory that never quite makes it into your rooms. Autumn brings a chill, and the fireplaces never quite warm the stone. Winter is a long, silent siege, broken only by the occasional burst of carolers in the courtyard, whose voices sound as if they are singing for someone already gone. You try sometimes to impose structure on the endless days. You sort and resort your small collection of personal items: a handkerchief embroidered with your initials, a prayer book, a faded letter from your childhood. You write replies to correspondence you will never send, sketch flowers from memory, or recite prayers in languages you barely understand. These rituals are not born of hope, but of desperation, anything to make the day feel different from the last. You are visited at regular intervals by the healers, the priests, and the few courtiers still brave enough to enter your rooms. Each visit follows the same script. How do you feel, Your Majesty? Any better today? You reply with variations of the same answer: a little better, thank you, or perhaps tomorrow. You know it is not the truth, but honesty is a luxury neither you nor they can afford. As the days blend together, you lose track of time. Festivals come and go without fanfare. The anniversary of your coronation passes, marked only by a handful of forced smiles and a special, inedible cake. Birthdays, deaths, political intrigues, none of it seems to touch you any longer. You feel as if you exist on a different plane, observing your own life through a layer of glass that no one else can see through. Sometimes, in moments of clarity, you realize how profoundly the illness has changed you. There are gaps in your memory, weeks, even months, that you cannot account for, as if time itself has decided you are not worth the effort. You wonder what you have missed, who has married, who has died, what decisions have been made in your absence. The world outside moves on, indifferent to your slow fade. You become acutely aware of the meaninglessness of many things you once considered important. The squabbles over precedence, the elaborate banquets, the carefully crafted alliances, all of them seem small and distant. Your kingdom, your titles, your jewels, none of them can alter the relentless, grinding passage of days. Still, there are moments of beauty, the light slanting through a stained glass window, the scent of a fresh rose brought in from the garden, the sound of distant bells marking the hour. These fleeting details are anchors in the drifting sea of time. You clutch at them, holding them close, reminding yourself that you are still alive, even as the days grow more indistinguishable. You begin to understand why the elderly and the infirm are so often described as patient. Patience is not a virtue you decide. It is simply the only way to survive when time itself refuses to move. And so you wait. For what? You are never sure. A change, a cure, an ending. You tell yourself, as you have been told since childhood, that this is only a season, that the wheel will turn and you will be restored. But somewhere deep inside, you know, the days have become your life, and your life has become waiting. Pain becomes the shape of your world. You used to believe that suffering was something dramatic, a brief, burning ordeal after which a person would either recover or die. But true pain, you learn, is not a matter of drama. It is a quiet, insistent presence woven into every movement, every breath, every moment of wakefulness and sleep. The body you once trusted to obey you has become a tyrant, each day inventing new ways to remind you who is truly in control. It starts small, as it always does. A twinge in your joints that lingers, a heaviness in your limbs that will not lift, a dull ache in your head that tightens and contracts until you cannot remember a time before it. You are told, as if it were a comfort, that these are the ordinary complaints of age and motherhood. But you are not yet old, and the ordinary is never quite as painful as this. Your back is the first to betray you. The stone benches and hard wooden chairs of the palace are merciless, designed for posture, not comfort. No cushion is soft enough, no position quite right. The pain sharpens as the days pass, radiating down your legs until standing and sitting are equally impossible. The healers try hot stones and cold cloths, ointments that stain your skin, and herbal compresses that leave you smelling of decay. Nothing helps. The pain in your abdomen is worse. It comes in waves, sometimes doubling you over, other times fading to a distant throb. After each child, the pain worsened until now it feels as if there is a stone inside you, heavy and jagged, rolling with every step. At night, the cramps are fierce, and sleep is a battlefield where rest must be fought for and never won. You try to hide your discomfort. Pain is unseemly in a queen, after all, but your face betrays you. Your teeth ache, loosen, and sometimes bleed. You are forbidden sweets, but the damage was done years ago in the endless parade of candied fruits and honeyed cakes meant to cheer you in better days. Now, every bite is a risk, and some days you cannot eat at all. The pain climbs from your jaw to your temples, sparking headaches that blur your vision and cloud your thoughts. You dread the approach of the barber surgeon with his promises to pull the offending tooth quickly and cleanly. A lie, of course, but one you are too tired to argue against. Your skin, once praised for its delicacy, now betrays you with eruptions and rashes, bruises that appear without cause, and patches of numbness that spread like frost. The court physicians debate whether this is the sign of a new disease or simply the outward mark of an inward decline. Either way, they prod and poke you with the enthusiasm of children presented with a new toy, but their curiosity brings no relief. Your breathing becomes labored, each inhale shallow and unsatisfying. Climbing the stairs is out of the question. Even walking from bed to chair leaves you dizzy and gasping. The cough that began as a minor irritation now rumbles deep in your chest, thick and relentless. Some days you cough until you retch, your throat raw and your head pounding. The healers prescribe honey and wine, then vinegar and ashes, then silence and prayer. The remedies change, but the cough remains, a steady companion, a metronome counting out the slow decline. No comfort can be found in the night. The pain sharpens in the dark, growing bolder without the distraction of daylight. You twist and turn, seeking a position that does not hurt, but there is none. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow and dreamless. You wake as tired as you were before, and sometimes worse. The hours between midnight and dawn are the longest, filled with dread, regret, and the soft, mocking certainty that tomorrow will be the same, or perhaps a little worse. The servants try to help. They bring heated stones for your feet, soft cloths for your head, and bowls of broth that you can barely manage to swallow. Their hands are gentle but hesitant. Nobody wants to linger too long in a sick room. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, you wish they would stay, just to share the burden of pain. But you are left alone with your aches, your memories, and the slow unraveling of your strength. Pain brings humility. You once thought yourself brave, but now you understand that true courage is quieter. It is the ability to endure, to keep breathing, to keep moving through each day when every part of you wants only to stop. You measure your worth not in titles or triumphs, but in how many days you can smile, how many mornings you can rise, how many moments you can pretend you are more than just a collection of symptoms. You come to accept that the body is not your ally, nor your enemy. It is simply a thing that endures, stubborn, foolish, and in the end, mortal. You do not hope for healing any longer. You hope only for relief. Sometimes you pray for numbness, for a few hours when the pain will fade and you will be allowed to forget. On those rare, blessed occasions, you remember what it was like to move without effort, to laugh without consequence, to live without pain. But those moments are rare and growing rarer. You are, you realize, as fragile as the lace at your wrists, as breakable as the thin glass in your windows. Each day, you lose something, a step, a meal, a laugh, but still you endure because endurance is all that remains. And you begin to wonder When the pain finally stops, will that be the day you die? Or will it be, at last, a kind of peace? Eventually, the aches and fevers of your body start to reach places that cannot be bandaged or bled. You always believed that illness belonged to flesh and bone, to joints, to lungs, to a stomach that rebels at the sight of food. But pain, you discover, is tireless in its ambitions. It seeps upward, crossing the last threshold until it clouds your thoughts, confuses your memories, and blurs the boundaries between sleep and waking. What begins as a physical ordeal becomes a journey into something far stranger, a mind slowly besieged by the slow artillery of disease. At first, it is little things. You forget names of servants, of courtiers, even of your own children for a heartbeat. Words you have used every day for years escape you, flitting away like birds startled from a tree. Sometimes you cannot remember why you sent for someone or whether you already ate breakfast. The palace, always a maze, becomes truly confusing. You call for a candle in daylight, for water when there is already a full jug by your bed. But this is only the beginning. Soon, there are dreams that do not wait for sleep. Faces from your childhood, your mother's perhaps, or some nurse long since dead, appear before you, speaking in voices both familiar and strange. The saints from the tapestries seem to step down from the walls in the flickering candlelight. You see your father, his crown askew, watching you with the tired eyes of a man who has seen too much suffering. With a part of your mind that still remembers reason that these are illusions. But another part of you, tired, feverish, and desperate for comfort, welcomes the company. There are darker visitations, too. You wake convinced that the air is thick with insects, crawling just out of sight. You hear whispers in the corners, indistinct but urgent, as if the stones themselves are plotting against you. Sometimes the curtains ripple when there is no wind, and you are sure that someone, something, is standing just beyond your vision, watching and waiting. Nights are worst. The darkness brings no peace, only new confusions. You find yourself wandering the edge of sleep, unable to tell where your body ends and the shadows begin. There are nights when you believe you have died and are watching your own wake. Other nights when you are sure you have been forgotten entirely, vanished from the world like a lost ring in the grass. Your dreams are filled with old fears, the sound of weeping, the press of unseen hands, the taste of blood on your tongue. Your attendants notice the change. They exchange glances, whisper to the physicians. They say you are confused, distressed, not yourself. You overhear the old words, melancholy, madness, a fever of the mind. The healers debate remedies, more rest, less light, a change in diet, more prayers, less company. You are told, gently, to stop worrying, to let your mind rest, as if willpower alone could reverse what your body has wrought. The priests are called more often now. They speak of temptation, of the devil's work, of the dangers of despair. They urge you to pray, to confess, to focus your thoughts on heaven. Sometimes their words are comforting. Sometimes they are another source of confusion. Their faces blur and change. You think for a moment that one priest is your father in disguise, or that your own voice is coming from someone else's lips. You begin to fear yourself, not just your failing body, but your mind's sudden strangeness. You try to anchor yourself in rituals, repeating prayers, counting beads, tracing the pattern of the bed curtains with trembling fingers. For a time, these things help, but the line between the world outside and the world inside grows ever thinner, and soon you cannot always tell which is which. There are days, too, when you are gripped by panic for no reason you can name. Your heart races, your hands shake, and your vision swims. You become convinced that you are being poisoned, that there are spies in your chamber, that your own servants are plotting your end. Other times, you are certain that you have already died, and that everything you see is some elaborate purgatory, a waiting room where pain is both punishment and proof that you still exist. Oddly, there are moments of peace in all this confusion. Sometimes, when the pain is sharpest and reality least certain, you feel strangely weightless, almost detached. It is as if the world's demands, duty, etiquette, even the expectation of suffering have fallen away, leaving you free to drift on a tide of memory and forgetting. You find comfort in old songs, in fragments of childhood prayers, in the shape of the clouds passing beyond your window. You become both smaller and larger, both child and ghost. But mostly, the experience is terrifying. You realize that even as your body betrays you, your mind will not protect you. The boundaries you once took for granted between real and imagined, between past and present, are dissolving faster than your strength. The world becomes a hall of mirrors, endlessly reflecting your fears back at you. And so, you wait in the twilight, never quite sure if you are awake or dreaming. The doctors and priests continue their rituals. The world outside continues its measured, indifferent march. You cling to whatever sense you can find, hoping for a clear day, a coherent hour, a moment when you remember who you are and where you are meant to be. But even this hope grows faint as the disease claims territory not just in your body, but in your mind. You understand now why so many prayers are for clarity, for deliverance not only from pain, but from confusion. In the end, you pray only for lucidity, for a moment of peace in which to say goodbye to yourself. While your body fights its private battle, the machinery of politics grinds on around you, steady, relentless, and utterly uninterested in your suffering. The truth, which you have suspected since childhood, is now impossible to ignore. A queen's illness is never merely her own affair. Your failing health is both a household drama and a matter of state, an open secret whispered behind every heavy door. The courtiers are first to adapt. Their concern, so warm and genuine at the onset of your illness, cools as your fevers drag on. They do not like to dwell too long in your rooms. Illness is contagious, but so is bad luck, and the ambitious know better than to associate too closely with decline. Instead, they gather in corners and corridors, weighing the consequences of your absence. Every cough, every missed meal, every day you do not appear at court becomes a fact for someone else's ledger. Your husband, always political first and personal second, is surrounded by his own circle of advisors. They do not speak openly of your condition in your presence, but you overhear enough to know your prognosis is a matter of fierce debate. Some urge him to prepare for the worst. What will become of Navarre if you die? Who will inherit your lands? What will the Pope say? Which alliances must be reinforced and which can be abandoned? Others whisper that perhaps you will recover, that a miracle is always possible, that it would be foolish to show weakness until the last moment. Hope, in their hands, is not so much comfort as a bargaining chip. There is a steady flow of letters between palaces, abbeys, and foreign courts. Messengers arrive from Navarre and from Paris, from Rome and from London, each bearing carefully phrased inquiries. How is the Queen? Is her condition stable? Should certain negotiations proceed or wait for clearer news? You are a subject for discussion in rooms you will never enter, your name appearing alongside border disputes and dowry negotiations. Each reference to your health is both a gesture of sympathy and a reminder that your body is part of the kingdom's foundation. Within your own household, the atmosphere thickens with speculation. Servants speculate about your decline, weighing the merits of various heirs, remembering past queens who died inconveniently young. Your children's tutors and governesses become more formal, more attentive to the shifting winds of favor. Everyone is careful with their words. A misplaced remark can ruin a career if the wrong person should die at the wrong time. The nursery, once noisy with laughter, is now a place of hushed voices and nervous glances. Your illness, you realize, is an opportunity for some and a threat for others. For ambitious courtiers, it is a moment to ingratiate themselves with your husband, to press their cases for advancement, to offer advice about which alliances to pursue in the event of your death. For your enemies, those with rival claims, those who resent your influence, it is a chance to press their advantage, to circulate rumors, to prepare for the inevitable shifting of power. You notice that gifts arrive more frequently, their senders hoping to be remembered favorably in case you recover, or, more cynically, by your husband if you do not. Some are practical, fine linens, exotic spices, medicinal herbs. Others are tokens of loyalty, small paintings or books of prayers, each a carefully coded message. No gesture is free from calculation. Even the prayers offered for your health are often double-edged, phrased so that should you die, it will not be the fault of the one who prayed. The church, of course, has its own interests. Bishops send messengers with relics and promises of masses said in your name. The more ambitious among them float suggestions for future marriages. Should the queen pass, it would be wise to unite the kingdoms with this or that noble house. The priests in your chamber are less direct, but their eyes are keen. and their gossip is the most precise in the palace. You overhear them debate which saint is likeliest to intervene, which feast day would be most auspicious for your recovery, or, if necessary, your funeral. Your husband's counselors grow restless, spending long hours behind closed doors. You hear your name mentioned in tones that are neither fond nor respectful, but practical. If the queen does not survive the summer, if the princess is declared heir, if we must appease Navarre with a new marriage, you become a conditional, a clause in a sentence, a problem to be managed rather than a person to be mourned. There are inevitably the vultures, those who wait for you to falter so they may swoop in. Your distant relatives write polite letters, offering prayers and subtle reminders of their own rights. Some foreign envoys pay extra attention to your children, their eyes calculating. A few even inquire about your jewelry and wardrobe, as if already taking inventory for the inevitable redistribution of wealth. Even your children are not immune. The older ones become more anxious, aware that their future hangs on the delicate thread of your health. They are coached in etiquette, in the correct forms of mourning, in the subtle art of winning favor from whoever stands to benefit most from your absence. You watch them from your bed, too tired to intervene, hoping they will learn enough to survive. In your rare lucid moments, you see the court for what it truly is, a living organism, always ready to shed the weak, to adapt to new realities. Your pain, your slow dying, is only one thread in a tapestry that stretches far beyond your own story. There is a kind of comfort in this, though it is a cold one, the knowledge that kingdoms persist, that dynasties endure, that you are, in the end, not as necessary as you once believed. You become both witness and casualty, spectator and victim, as the court prepares for a future without you. The world moves on, politics never pausing for the sick, the dying, or even the dead. And so you lie in your bed, listening to the shuffle of ambition in the hallways, knowing that your suffering is merely another lever, another calculation, another chapter in the endless, indifferent chronicle of power. Eventually, the weight of pain and the nearness of death make you reconsider eternity. You have grown up in a world where confession is as routine as meals, expected, regular, a matter of course. But now, as your body weakens and the voices in the corridor seem to fade ever farther away, confession takes on a new, deeper urgency. This is not the polite ceremony of Lent or the perfunctory ritual before childbirth. This is the final audit, the last account, the quiet negotiation between soul and shadow. A priest is summoned, as is proper. He is younger than you expected, his hair dark, his face anxious, his hands too soft to inspire confidence. He smells of incense and nervousness. He bows low, murmuring words meant to comfort, to remind you that all earthly things pass. You are too tired to protest, too spent to manage more than a small, ironic smile. The ritual begins. You are propped up with pillows, blankets heaped around your shrinking form, the room thick with the scent of beeswax and lavender. Your ladies withdraw, leaving you alone with the priest and your conscience. Outside, you can hear the muffled clatter of daily life, a reminder that the world, unlike you, still obeys its ancient routines. Do you repent of your sins? The priest asks, and you want to laugh, not because you think yourself innocent, but because your sins, weighed against the vast, impersonal machinery of fate, seem so small, so terribly ordinary. You repent, of course. You confess the lies told to soothe or deceive, the moments of anger, the selfishness, the fleeting pride in survival when others have not been so lucky. You confess your envy of the strong and the healthy, your bitter thoughts and sleepless nights, your secret desire sometimes for the suffering to simply end. The priest listens, eyes averted, hands folded. He asks the familiar questions, leading you along a path worn smooth by centuries of royal deaths. Sometimes you surprise yourself with honesty. You admit your resentment toward those who hovered at your bedside with false hope, your impatience with your own children, your frustration with the endless parade of useless cures. You confess to hating the silence, the isolation, the way fear drives people away, until you are nothing but a rumor in your own palace. He absolves you with ancient words, voice low and practiced. The absolution is both a comfort and a formality. You know, as he does, that forgiveness does not lessen the pain or change the outcome, but it is one more duty fulfilled, one less thing to faire as the world grows dim around you. For a moment, you are left alone, and the silence is different now, not heavy with waiting, but almost peaceful. You think of your mother, lost so young that you barely remember her. You think of your father, the weight of the crown, the tiny hands of your children clinging to yours. You remember moments of laughter, of sunlight, of music drifting through open windows. These memories flicker like candle flames, bright, fragile, easily extinguished. You wonder what comes next. The priests have assured you of heaven, of reunion and rest, of suffering ended and joy restored. But you, ever the skeptic, are not so certain. You imagine eternity as another kind of waiting room, filled with souls whose only common trait is their unfinished business. Perhaps you think heaven is less a place than a permission, an allowance to let go, to finally sleep. You do not fear damnation. Your sins, measured by the standards of history, seem almost quaint. You fear only oblivion, the idea that everything you were, every thought, every hope, every tiny victory over pain might vanish without a trace. You pray, not for paradise, but for remembrance. Let someone remember that you tried, that you endured, that you loved in the small, battered way allowed to queens. The priest returns to your side, murmuring another prayer, and for a brief instant you almost believe him. The pain is no less, but it seems farther away. You think you hear music, perhaps the wind through the trees, perhaps your mind playing tricks. You let your eyes close, drifting between worlds, carried by words older than memory. When you wake again, the priest is gone, the ladies have returned, and the ordinary business of dying resumes. You feel lighter, not because you are healed, but because you have finally named your burdens, counted your regrets, and placed them in someone else's hands. The world remains as it is, indifferent, stubborn, eternal. But for a moment you have bargained with it, and that is enough. You lie back, counting the small mercies, a soft pillow, a warm blanket, a moment's reprieve from pain. The future, once so full of plans and alliances, is now a single question mark hanging quietly above your bed. You do not know what comes next. You only know that you are ready. And that perhaps is the greatest comfort confession has to offer, not the promise of paradise, but the freedom to let go, to rest, and to meet what comes, be it darkness, light, or something in between, with open eyes and a steady heart. The last days, you are told, are the hardest, though by now the word hard has lost any useful meaning. You have lived for so long inside a fortress of suffering that it is difficult to believe there is any further ground left for pain to conquer. Yet the world and your body are endlessly inventive. The difference now is not so much the intensity of the agony, though that remains, as its constancy. There are no more reprieves, no gentle afternoons, no brief hours of peace. Every moment is both an ordeal and an achievement. You are still alive, though you are not sure why. Your breathing becomes labor. Where once a breath was thoughtless, automatic, it is now the product of effort and intention. The air is thick, heavy, unwilling to come and slower to leave. Each inhalation rattles in your chest as if your lungs are filled with pebbles and the echoes of old prayers. Even speaking becomes difficult. You choose your words carefully, not out of diplomacy, but out of necessity. Each sentence is a project. Each word must be weighed against the cost of its delivery. The people around you are shadows, their faces blurring into a procession of worry and exhaustion. Your husband visits less frequently, though when he does appear, he tries to look strong. You see only the fear in his eyes, the calculation in his silences. Your children, if allowed in at all, are shepherded quickly to your bedside and then away again before the reality of your decline can settle too deeply in their minds. You are both presence and absence, already becoming a memory for those you love. There is, in these final days, a strange clarity. With every sense turned inward by pain, the world outside becomes sharper, more defined. The smallest details, a patch of sunlight on the stone floor, the chill of a cup held too long, the way the curtains shift in the evening breeze, take on the significance of omens. You find yourself grateful for small mercies. The sound of distant music, the gentle touch of a servant's hand, the faint sweetness of watered wine when you can swallow it. Your room shrinks. The outside world becomes something you hear of in fragments. Rumors of court intrigues, the weather in the gardens, the latest diplomatic crisis. None of it seems real or important. The only reality is the day-to-day struggle, the relentless negotiation between the desire to rest and the fear of letting go. Sleep comes in snatches, short and shallow. When you wake, there is a moment of confusion. Are you alive or simply dreaming that you are? The physicians still visit, though their remedies have grown tentative and half hearted. They arrange your pillows, count your pulse, discuss your symptoms in low voices, as if naming your suffering too loudly might drive you over the brink. No more bold treatments, no more experiments. All that is left is comfort, or what passes for comfort in a world that has run out of cures. You sense their relief when they leave the room, and you do not begrudge them. They too have run out of answers. Time, which once stretched endlessly before you, now contracts into something small, tight, and precious. You measure it in breaths, in heartbeats, in the rare moments when you can smile or hold a hand. You feel yourself slipping further from the person you once were, a queen, a wife, a mother, and becoming something else, a figure in a story, a page in a chronicle, a memory waiting to be written down. Your senses play tricks. Sometimes you are sure you see your mother at the foot of the bed, her face gentle, her eyes sad. You hear old songs, catch the scent of spring in the stale air. Are these real or just the mind's way of softening the blow? You cannot say, and it does not matter. What matters is the comfort, the fleeting ease of the familiar. The world outside continues its inexorable pace. You hear the bells mark the hours, the footsteps in the corridors, the low hum of voices beyond your door. But you are no longer a participant. You have become an observer, a witness to your own passing. Even your pain is less a battle now than a background noise, a constant ache that marks the passage of time. There are moments, brief, rare, and unlooked for, when fear gives way to a kind of peace. You are not afraid of death, not really. You have been so close for so long that it seems almost friendly, a companion who has been waiting patiently for you to be ready. You are tired, yes, but not defeated. You have outlasted more than anyone expected, perhaps even yourself. Now, as the days shorten and the world contracts to the size of your small, dimly lit room, you are ready to rest. You do not know what the end will be like. You imagine it will be quiet, maybe unnoticed at first, a final exhalation followed by stillness. No trumpets, no dramatic last words, just the gradual uncoupling of body and soul, the world continuing as always, indifferent and eternal. Perhaps there will be sorrow, or perhaps only relief. Perhaps your name will be spoken in hushed tones, or perhaps quickly forgotten as the court moves on. You hope in these last moments for one thing, that those who remember you will think not of your suffering, but of your endurance. That in a world where pain is common and comfort rare, you managed for a while to keep breathing. And so you do, one breath at a time, until the effort is too great, and even the smallest mercies begin to fade. Morning comes, but you barely notice. The room is dim, muffled, and impossibly distant, as if you are wrapped in endless layers of wool and memory. The shapes of furniture and faces are soft at the edges, blurred by exhaustion, fever, and the heavy pall of night that seems never to lift. You hear voices, hushed and hurried, speaking just beyond your field of vision. Sometimes you think they are talking to you, sometimes about you, but it hardly matters. The world beyond your bed has already begun to recede, slipping away like water through cupped hands. This is the moment everyone has prepared for, but few actually attend. Dying, it turns out, is not the grand spectacle promised in poetry or prayer. There are no golden shafts of light, no choirs of angels, no final gathering of friends and family hanging on your last words. Most of the household is simply tired, tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of the endless cycles of false alarms. The grandest thing about your death is how ordinary it is. You hear perhaps the rustle of the priest's robes as he enters one last time, clutching his book and a small flask of oil. He begins the prayers for the dying, the same ones you have heard at a dozen royal bedsides, only now you are the main attraction. His voice is low, melodic, and comforting in its routine. You wonder, as your consciousness flickers, whether he is thinking of supper or perhaps calculating how soon he might return home if he hurries through the final rites. Your breathing grows shallow, slow, and uneven. Each gasp is a victory against the night, each pause a cliff edge where you dangle between worlds. For a moment, your mind sharpens, just enough to recognize the weight of the moment, the way the universe has narrowed to this single, fragile point in time. There are no profound insights, no flood of memories, just a growing sense of relief. The struggle is almost over. You have nothing left to prove. Your body, that ancient adversary, finally lets go. Muscles loosen, pain ebbs, and a heaviness settles over your limbs, not unpleasant but oddly freeing. For so long, every joint and sinew has been a source of betrayal. Now, they surrender without protest. You cannot move, but you do not want to. There is nothing left to reach for, nothing left to endure. If there are tears, they are quiet, quickly wiped away. If someone weeps at your bedside, it is with exhaustion as much as grief. No one howls, no one faints. You have outlived most of the people who cared enough to be melodramatic. The servants watch from a respectful distance, more relieved than bereaved. Your husband, if present, keeps his eyes lowered, a mixture of duty and embarrassment etched into his face. Your children, if they are old enough, will remember this only as a shadow, something they were told not to fear, but always to expect. The doctors, hovering at the margins, are oddly silent. They do not declare the moment. They have learned by now that death needs no introduction. Instead, they wait, counting heartbeats, listening for the last rattle, the final sigh. When it comes, it is almost a disappointment. No drama, just a gentle slipping away. If you could speak, You might apologize for not making a better show of it. It takes a moment, perhaps more, before anyone is sure. The priest completes his blessing, marking your forehead with oil. The women in the room murmur prayers, some more out of habit than conviction. The clock ticks on. Someone opens a window, and for the first time in weeks, the room feels lighter, less claustrophobic. A faint breeze stirs the curtains, and you are gone, leaving behind only the slow, astonished realization that the waiting is over. Word spreads quietly, almost apologetically, through the palace. There are no immediate wails or wrenched garments, only a tired sort of resignation. The officials make their notes, the physicians quietly pack their instruments, already thinking of their next patient, or perhaps their next meal. Your name is written on a list, your passing added to the slow, inexorable roll of history. There are things to be done, bodies to be washed, letters to be sent, ceremonies to be arranged. It is, in the end, not much different from any other day. The sun rises and sets, the cooks prepare supper, the court begins to speculate about what comes next. You, once the focus of so much hope and fear, become just another story, a cautionary tale, a footnote in a chronicle, a memory that fades more quickly than the scent of incense in the air. For all the weight of your life, your death is startlingly undramatic. No omens, no miracles, just a final, exhausted surrender. The world, as ever, refuses to pause. The bells toll softly, and life at court resumes its careful, indifferent dance. If there is a lesson, it is perhaps this: death for a queen is neither tragedy nor triumph. It is simply the final chapter of a story everyone saw coming, told in whispers, finished with a sigh. The greatest irony is how little it matters in the end, how quietly the world closes the door behind you and carries on. The moment of your passing is not, as you might have once imagined, the end of the story. If anything, it is the beginning of a new chapter, one in which you are present in every conversation and yet entirely absent, an object to be managed, mourned, and, inevitably, discussed. Death, for a queen, is never private. It is a spectacle, a bureaucratic hurdle, and above all, an opportunity. Your body does not rest. Even in death, you are on display. The ladies of the chamber, faces set in the solemn mask of duty, dress you in clean linens and arrange your limbs with a precision that is both tender and detached. They work quickly and quietly, aware that the work is being watched, not only by other servants, but by the silent ghosts of protocol and tradition. Everything must be done just so, with nothing left to chance or sentiment. Once you are presentable, you are placed on a bier in the great hall, your face visible, your hands folded in prayer. Courtiers file past in careful procession. Some cross themselves, others offer silent prayers, a few dab at dry eyes. The most ambitious among them ensure they are seen, murmuring rehearsed condolences to anyone within earshot. For a day, at least, everyone at court agrees on the proper display of grief. But the rituals are more than mourning. They are also proof that you are, in fact, dead, and that the business of succession can proceed. The physicians are summoned to sign documents, the priests to recite masses, the heralds to announce your death in all the correct places. Messengers are sent galloping to the borders. Letters are dispatched to Rome, Paris, and Navarre. News travels, and with it, the first eddies of rumor. It is astonishing the things people will say about a dead queen. Some swear you died of heartbreak, others that you were poisoned. The symptoms of your final illness become a subject for amateur physicians and armchair conspirators alike. The favorite theory changes by the hour. It was the water, it was the food, it was the air, it was the nurse who visited last week with a new prayer for recovery. Every enemy is accused, every friend suspected, and every unexplained event in the palace's recent history is somehow connected to your demise. The more dramatic among the courtiers drop hints about secret lovers and hidden children. Did you notice, someone whispers, how she never quite recovered after that visit from the ambassador? Another nods knowingly. I heard she confessed something terrible on her deathbed. Even your most harmless habits, your fondness for rosewater, your aversion to certain foods, are examined for signs of hidden meaning. Every aspect of your life, so closely watched while you lived, is now picked apart for clues about your death. Scandal, of course, is never far behind. The most practical minds at court immediately turn to the question of succession. Who inherits? Who controls the dowry lands? Who will be the first to propose a strategic marriage for your widower, your children, your surviving relatives? The pace is frantic, but the tone is matter of fact. After all, the future cannot wait for the dead. Your apartments are cleared, your possessions inventoried, your personal servants dismissed or reassigned. Letters of condolence arrive from distant courts, each carefully worded to balance genuine regret and political calculation. Some go even further. There are accusations of witchcraft, of curses, of old family feuds revived by your passing. Priests and monks debate whether your soul is safely on its way to heaven or still lingering, perhaps in need of additional prayers, or, failing that, a more substantial donation to the nearest monastery. The relics that once cluttered your bedside are now distributed as mementos, holy tokens with the dubious power to ward off whatever killed you. For a while, your name is everywhere. Poets compose verses in your memory, somber, dutiful, and utterly forgettable. Chroniclers write up your last days with varying degrees of accuracy and imagination. Portraits are draped in black, tapestries rehung, altars lit with extra candles. The palace, for all its business and bustle, moves with a heavy tread, as if weighed down by the ritual performance of loss. And then, just as suddenly, you begin to recede. The court's attention shifts. The new queen, if there is one, is presented, her youth and health discussed in hopeful tones. New intrigues take root, new alliances are formed. Your rooms are repainted, your favorite chair given away, your smallest luxuries divided among those who remain. The rhythm of the palace returns, indifferent and familiar. Outside the palace, in the towns and villages, stories about your death echo, change, and spread. Some say they saw your ghost at a window on the night you died. Others claim your last words were a prophecy, a warning, a curse. There are rumors that you are not truly dead, that you fled in disguise, or that a miracle will reveal your innocence or guilt. People cling to such stories because they are easier to believe than the simple, unglamorous fact of illness and death. In the end, your death becomes what all deaths become, a story told by those who remain. For a brief moment, you are everywhere, in the prayers of the faithful, the gossip of the servants, the calculations of politicians, the imaginings of children who peer at your empty windows. And then, little by little, you fade, not with a cry, but with a whisper, your life absorbed into the unending business of the living. There is one last ritual, the burial, attended by those who must and watched by those who wish to be seen. The earth closes over you, the prayers are recited, and the court returns to its duties. Your memory lingers, not as a warning or a lesson, but as a faint perfume in the corridors, sometimes noticed, mostly forgotten, a part of the palace as much as the stones and shadows themselves. In the weeks and months after your death, the palace returns to life with a determined, even cheerful efficiency. The business of government, the demands of succession, the old rivalries and new ambitions all move briskly on. But while the living are busy, the dead are not so easily dismissed. A new industry takes shape, quieter, but no less determined, the business of recording, remembering, and most importantly, explaining your end. The first to take up the pen are the court chroniclers. They have been present, more or less invisibly, throughout your reign, scribbling in the shadows at every feast and council, quietly noting your ailments and absences. Now, their moment has come. With solemn expressions and, in some cases, barely disguised excitement, they begin to shape your life and death into something suitable for posterity. Your death, they decide, must be meaningful. It is not enough to have died of an unknown fever, or a wasting illness, or even God's will. The chroniclers need details, noble suffering, instructive pain, signs and portents. One insists that you died clutching a relic, murmuring a prayer for your kingdom's salvation. Another records, with a straight face, that you foresaw your own end in a dream filled with doves and black clouds. Where the facts are thin, imagination fills in the gaps. The monks of distant abbeys take up the story. They write you into their ledgers and their sermons, sometimes as an example of Christian fortitude, sometimes as a warning against pride or despair. Your piety is exaggerated, your faults quietly omitted or dressed up as virtues. You become, for a little while, a convenient emblem. A queen who suffered nobly, a woman who submitted to the will of God, a lesson in humility for those who remain. With each retelling, Your story changes. The dates are not quite right. The symptoms blur. The cause of death shifts. Was it fever, consumption, poison, a broken heart, the hand of an enemy, or the inscrutable will of heaven? The chroniclers debate, sometimes fiercely, sometimes lazily, usually depending on who is paying for their ink and parchment. Your life becomes an argument, your death a riddle to be solved. Every scrap of writing from your own hand is hunted down, copied, sometimes edited. Your surviving letters are quoted, often out of context, to support the preferred version of events. Your actions are reinterpreted with the benefit or the curse of hindsight. Every choice is a symbol, every misfortune a warning. A generation later, no one will know what you really thought or felt, only what has been written and rewritten by those who needed your memory to fit their needs. Inevitably, mistakes creep in. Your name is misspelled, your titles confused, your relatives misplaced in family trees that now serve political rather than genealogical purposes. One chronicler confuses you with another gene. A monk assigns your favorite psalm to someone else. In the margins of their manuscripts, the copyists add their own errors, sometimes out of ignorance, sometimes out of boredom, sometimes because the story is more interesting when the queen dies at midnight in a thunderstorm than in the dull gray silence of dawn. Yet, even as the truth is twisted and forgotten, something of you persists. For every grand lie or careless mistake, there is a detail that rings true. A line of poetry you loved, a kindness recalled by a servant, a quirk of humor remembered by a lady in waiting. The facts are sanded smooth, but the outline of your life, its shape, its sadness, its fleeting joys, lingers in the cracks. The more ambitious chroniclers use your death to prove a point. Some claim your suffering is a sign of divine displeasure. Others insist it was the necessary price for the peace that followed. Your name appears in treatises on medicine, in lectures on queenship, in sermons about fate. Sometimes you are praised, sometimes pitied, sometimes both. In time, you become a reference, an example to be invoked when a new queen falls ill, a story told to children who ask too many questions about life and death. As the years pass, memory turns you into a legend, then a rumor, then just another page in a manuscript. Yet even the mistakes, the misrememberings, the little lies, are proof that you mattered, if only for a while. Your story is copied, recopied, debated, and eventually forgotten, but never quite erased. Someone, somewhere, will always stumble across your name, puzzled by a detail, touched by a sentence, wondering what kind of person you really were. History, you realize, is less a cure than an opiate, a way of soothing the anxieties of the living, a balm for those afraid of how little or how much they will be remembered. You become, in the end, less yourself than a shadow, part fact, part fiction, part cautionary tale for generations to come. And so your death lingers on, no, but not in the ache of your bones or the echo of your voice, but in the uneven lines of monks and the missteps of chroniclers, the mistakes that become memory, and the memory that becomes history. Centuries pass, and the story of your life and death is told and retold, embroidered and eroded by the hands of time. Your name surfaces in medical treatises, historical chronicles, and occasionally in the uncertain whispers of bored scholars faced with too many dusty manuscripts. With every new generation, the details of your suffering grow dimmer, but the strangeness of your treatment grows sharper, never more so than when later ages look back at medieval medicine with a mixture of incredulity and barely suppressed laughter. It becomes fashionable for learned men, doctors, historians, even poets, to revisit the cases of the great and unfortunate dead. You are a favorite subject, a queen, a mother, a symbol of all that is noble and tragic in human frailty. The specifics of your illness are debated in university halls and candlelit studies. Was it tuberculosis, cancer, lupus, or as some suggest, with a flourish of authority, merely the predictable consequence of a lifetime spent inhaling the noxious fumes of medieval kitchens? Medical students in later centuries will read with horror and not a little glee about your bloodlettings, your poultices of bread and lard, your regimen of honey, garlic, and betel ash. They will shake their heads at the cheerful ignorance of the physicians who attended you, laughing at the idea that the mere draining of blood could restore a failing queen. They will marvel at the sheer persistence of leeches, the universal application of vinegar, and the endless parade of relics and prayers prescribed for every conceivable ailment. One cannot help but notice a peculiar satisfaction among your descendants as they catalog the follies of your age. The so-called experts of later centuries recount the old recipes with a theatrical shudder. Take the gall of a pig, the ashes of 3 candles, and a cup of wine, reads one incredulous commentator, and prepare to lose not only your pain, but your will to live. The irony is thick and comforting, a balm for their own uncertainty. We, they assure themselves, know better. Our science is true, our cures rational. We would never be so foolish. Your suffering becomes a kind of grim entertainment for the modern mind. Museums display the surgical tools that once haunted your bedside: saws, lancets, heavy wooden forceps, and invite visitors to imagine the agony of even the mildest operation. Reenactments are staged for students and television cameras alike. Actors in rough linen playing at illness, at bleeding, at the endless recitations of prayers to saints whose names no one now remembers. Even the holy relics are catalogued and displayed, stripped of their power, their authenticity now a matter for curators and skeptics. Your death, in this new light, is viewed less as a tragedy and more as a cautionary tale, a lesson in the dangers of ignorance, of faith misplaced in the hands of well-meaning incompetence. Medical textbooks cite your case as proof of progress. See how far we have come, they say, from the dark ages of leeches and amulets to the age of antiseptic and anesthesia. You are a footnote in the story of science, a convenient before picture for an age obsessed with after, and yet beneath the surface, there is something more complicated at work. The moderns, for all their certainty, cannot quite rid themselves of a secret, uneasy kinship with the past. Your treatments were misguided, but they were earnest. Your prayers were futile, but they were heartfelt. The faith that filled your room with relics and saints, however irrational, was rooted in the same desperate hope that animates every hospital, every clinic, every midnight vigil at a loved one's bedside. There are even a few honest voices, doctors with a sense of history, scholars with a sense of irony, who point out that the future is likely to judge their own age just as harshly. What will later centuries make of bleeding and purging, of prayers and relics, of chemotherapy and radiation, of surgeries and experiments and endless, anxious hope? We may mock the medievals, they caution, but we too are only doing our best with what we know. Your memory in these hands becomes both a warning and a mirror. You are the victim of your era's limits, yes, but also its striving, its search for meaning and suffering, its refusal to give in to despair. The laughter of descendants, the clever commentary of modern experts, cannot quite obscure the deeper kinship that runs beneath. The knowledge that pain is timeless, that hope is universal, and that every generation, in its own way, must face the same hard lessons. In the end, your death is both comedy and tragedy, a study in human folly and an anthem for human endurance. The tools change, the theories shift, but the great struggle remains. Your story is told, retold, and, if only for a moment, remembered with a mixture of pity, amusement, and perhaps a touch of respect. So the irony of your era is preserved not just in laughter, but in the uneasy sense that the story is not yet finished. The age that laughs at you today may be tomorrow's exhibit, and your suffering, misunderstood as it was, becomes part of a long, unbroken chain of human hope, error, and endurance. When all is done, your body lowered into the earth, your name transcribed into the ledgers, your memories scattered across stories and mistakes, the world does not pause. It does not even slow down. Your death, which filled rooms with whispers, prayers, and careful observation, becomes quickly absorbed into the greater tapestry of events that make up the history of your time. The court returns to its rhythms. The fields outside the palace turn with the seasons. The people, from king to servant, rise, eat, work, and sleep just as they did before. A new queen is installed, her youth and promise discussed with cautious optimism. She is shown to her rooms, dressed in new silks, advised to avoid draughts and melancholy humors, as if your fate can be escaped by vigilance alone. The courtiers, ever adaptable, transfer their loyalties with barely a missed beat, an extra smile for the new mistress, a polite prayer for the one who came before. Your children learn to navigate a palace where you are now a portrait, a memory in a mourning veil, a story to be told or avoided in quiet corners. Even the rituals of grief do not last. The bells toll, the priests chant, the candles burn down to stubs, and the black cloths are slowly removed from the windows. A week passes, then a month. The kitchen reverts to its usual chaos. The court musicians tune their instruments for a wedding, a feast, a celebration. Your name, which once commanded a hush in every conversation, is used less and less, reserved for anniversaries or the awkward moments before dinner when a toast is required. Outside the palace, life is even less sentimental. The peasants plow and sow, grumble about taxes, marry, and bury their own dead in the same earth that now claims you. They might hear a rumor, the queen has died, God rest her soul, and nod, more interested in the coming harvest or the price of bread than in the fate of a distant ruler. You are remembered in passing, a shadow among many, your suffering lost in the great tide of everyday endurance. History, that tireless scribe, folds your story into its pages and moves on. The chroniclers, who once debated the cause of your illness, turn their attention to the next crisis, a war, a scandal, a miraculous birth. Your children's children grow up reading your name in old books, hearing your life described in words that rarely match the reality. Sometimes they feel pride, sometimes pity, sometimes nothing at all. You become, at last, what all the dead become, an ancestor, a piece of the past used to explain the present, a ghost in the genealogy of kingdoms. Even your suffering becomes a kind of inheritance, not just for your descendants, but for the age itself. New medicines are tried, new prayers composed, new relics displayed with hope and skepticism in equal measure. Queens fall ill and are attended by new generations of healers, priests, and chroniclers, each as certain and uncertain as the last. The cycle repeats: hope, treatment, rumor, loss, and the patient, implacable march of time. If you could see it, you might laugh, softly, without bitterness. The wheel turns, the faces change, but the story is always the same. Each generation writes its tragedies, believes them unique, and is astonished to learn that their pain is old, their fears familiar, their endings shared. You are not alone in this. You never were. The very structure of your world is built from the bones of those who came before, their stories repeating in every palace, every sick room, every whispered prayer. Perhaps, in the end, there is a kind of peace in this endless repetition. Your death was neither the first nor the last, neither the most tragic nor the most glorious. It was simply a part of the unbroken rhythm of life and loss, a note in a long, unchanging song. The history books close, the candles gutter out, and the world, indifferent and persistent, rolls forward. If there is any comfort, it is this: nothing is truly lost. Your breath, your pain, your small hopes and enduring fears are folded into the vast, murmuring silence that follows every story. The era that bore you on its current, that spun you through duty and sickness and expectation, continues on its way. You are gone, but the cycle continues. Queens, courtiers, peasants, and priests, each awaiting their turn, each believing, as you once did, that the world will stop for them. It never does. And that perhaps is not tragedy, but a peculiar kind of mercy. To know that the world, so grand and indifferent, is bigger than any single story, and that your suffering, however sharp, was never born alone.